Yeah, hello and welcome back to my channel. After a long break, let's go on with small little lectures on a very fascinating topic, value-added tax, based on examples and rules from German law. However, you know that value-added tax everywhere in the EU has the same underlying logic, and the core of the rules is probably to be found in very similar way in other EU states. Okay, so where are we at the moment? Chapter 2, that was cross-border transactions, has been dealt with nearly completely last year already, up to part 57 of our small lecture here. And the next topic we have to talk about is combined cases. We have spoken about third country cases, so import and exports. We have spoken about cross-border trade within the EU. However, there is a combination possible that goods are first imported and then sent on to another EU state. And that is where we are going to talk about this time, just to make our knowledge of the rules for cross-border trades with goods complete. Let's just imagine we have here on the right side a supplier in a third country. Then there is a hard border, the EU border. There's a customs office. And now let's look what happens. And the final customer is far inside the EU, so some other country. The good is imported into the EU and then moved on to the final customer in a second or third EU state. So here we have the goods at the beginning. They are in that third state. And now they are sent to the EU. Naturally, the customs office says, hey, stop importation VAT on the value of these goods to the customs office. The deliverer gets probably a receipt, and then the goods are passed on and travel to the final destination. Here they arrive in member state 2, and surprise, they are handed over to the final customer. So here is the country of destination, and you remember that under the basic system and basic logic of value-added tax and all other indirect taxes, the final tax, or the tax, should finally go to the country of destination. The only question is, how do we organize that in our system of the legal rules, that indeed the tax will be paid in the final destination and that the good does not vanish into nowhere untaxed in the meantime. And so let's have a look. How can a correct solution be achieved here? First, your deliverer crosses the border, so the deliverer or supplier pays importation VAT. Then you must remember there was a special rule in the VAT Act, that was paragraph 3.8 USDG, which says that if during a delivery a good comes from the third country into the inland, plus the VAT is paid by the deliverer, then the place of supply or the place of delivery is shifted to the country where the importation takes place. That means in member state 1, the deliverer has to hand in a VAT declaration, because under the regular rules of 1.1 number 1. So not only the VAT importation at the customs office, but additionally also 1.1 number 1 is fulfilled. So that number for which you have to hand in a tax declaration to the fiscal office, because our deliverer is an entrepreneur, acts within his enterprise for consideration because demands a price, delivers a good, and the place of that delivery is by legal fiction placed in the country where the importation takes place, so in member state 1. So number one is fully fulfilled. The deliverer is taxable, has to hand in a tax declaration for that delivery. Then in that tax declaration, naturally, our deliverer can first claim back the importation tax as an input tax, which he paid for his enterprise purposes. Okay, now the delivery itself becomes taxable there in the number one. However, as we have seen in the previous slide, let's go back there. What we see here is, oh my God, let's go back here. The good comes to member state 1. Now here a taxable delivery has to be declared. However, during that delivery, that good leaves that member state and goes to another member state. So it's possible that we have from member state 1 to member state 2 an intra-community delivery, which is then tax-free. So our deliverer crosses the borders, comes into contact with the customs office and makes an importation VAT payment. That's important because from now on the deliverer can no longer vanish into nowhere without having paid anything. He has now been detected by the authorities and has made a preliminary or first payment, so he cannot really avoid paying any more. The correct procedure is then to hand in later a tax declaration to the fiscal office in the same state, and then to tell them the good didn't remain here, it goes to another member state. So it's an intra-community delivery if my customer was also an enterprise owner. And in order to prove that, I need to give proofs for the transport to member state 2, plus to identify my customer by giving customer's VAT identification number from the country of destination. Then our deliverer is free of tax in member state 1. He also has the obligation, as in all intra-community delivery cases, to communicate the VAT number of his customer plus the net amount of the delivery in the so-called recapitulative statement to the fiscal authorities of member state 1. Member state 1 now automatically exchanges that information with member state 2. So member state 2 gets the information that customer, as an entrepreneur, has acquired goods coming from member state 1 with a net amount of, let's say, let it be 10,000. Our customer also knows I am an enterprise owner. I bought something which, according to the invoice of the deliverer, has been marked as an intra-community delivery free of tax. So I have to pay an intra-community acquisition tax on that good which I acquired. Yeah. So the system is relatively complex but understandable. The good crosses the border, customs office takes a tax which is probably levied on the estimated value of the goods. Now you have been detected by the authorities. Now you can either vanish, then they still have the money, or you do it legally, which is highly recommendable because otherwise you might be punished. Legally, then, as a supplier, you are also liable to declare what you did with the good under number 1 to the same state's fiscal office. It's a taxable transaction. However, it's free of tax if you can identify it as an intra-community delivery. So you declare that everything's fine. Now the fiscal authorities get the information who your customer has been. And so your customer has not only the obligation to declare the good which he or she acquired, but also has no chance to hide the acquisition. And so after you cross the border, we have a supervision of the good which is complete until the last one pays in the correct state. So that's very convenient. However, Here, in that case, we have a supervision without gaps. You can follow the fate of the good in all documents. However, there might be still a question. If, let's look at the last paragraph here, if your customer is not an entrepreneur but a private person. Because then, intra-community delivery only works if your customer is also an entrepreneur. If your customer is a private person, so too much of an idiot, that one could expect that your private customer pays the tax of his own state, then only the deliverer has a chance to fulfill these obligations. Think of our testing scheme for inter-community cases. Step 1 was your customer is an entrepreneur, then customer pays inter-community tax. You just, as a deliverer, prove that the customer exists in the other state and pays the tax there, so you are free of tax in the state where you send it away. In the case that the customer is not an entrepreneur but a private person, then the only person who can fulfill the tax obligations in the country of destination are you, the deliverer. So the place of delivery will then be shifted to the place where your private customer lives, so to member state 2, and that would be done by paragraph 3c USDG. Indeed, so distance selling rules. So indeed, that should be expected here. So in that case, we would expect a slightly different solution. You cross the border, pay the importation tax in state 1. Now the distance selling rules apply because you as an entrepreneur send a good from one member state 1, although you just imported it. You send a good now from member state 1 to member state 2 to a private person. In that case, if you are not below the delivery thresholds, then the distance selling rules apply and shift the place of delivery to the final destination where your private customer lives. So 3.8 is no longer in play. It is overruled by 3C1. And so you have to shift your tax, to hand in your tax declaration in the country of the customer. Now, if somebody wants to track what you did with the goods which you imported, showing the authorities of member state 1, the tax declaration which you handed in member state 2 should be sufficient proof that what happened with the goods and that you thoroughly and correctly fulfilled your fiscal obligations in the common market. However, nevertheless, you would be able to claim, as before, your refund from the fiscal authorities in member state 1 for the importation tax, because naturally you bought or you imported these goods for your entrepreneurial purposes, and they were not tax-free in country 1, but they were taxable only in country B2. That doesn't affect your right to an input tax refund. So that is the trick. If you have an import and afterwards send the good to another member state, so you have a combination of the rules for importation VAT, and then you just say if that good goes from the state where it has been imported to the other state, you just apply the normal rules for intra-community trade, starting from member state 1 to member state 2. So that's the simple trick. Yeah, so what we still have to do is naturally to practice all these things, and that will be done in the next videos.